Hey folks, this is Tom Crawford with Technodine, and today we're going to step through in this video how to calibrate the Technodine Test Plus directional TAPPI brightness instrument. Okay, so but before we get into the actual calibration sequence, there's some things I want to make sure that we're all on the same page to make sure that we're doing things right. Now, in the TAPPI method for the directional instrument, for any directional instrument, you have to be mindful of the machine orientation of the fibers coming off the paper machine. Okay, and by that I mean if we're looking down on, say, the forming table of the paper machine, and this is the head box here, right? Okay, so this is the machine direction of the paper machine. When we're talking about calibrating and making measurements on a directional brightness instrument, well, we have to be mindful of that because the orientation of the fibers will affect the readings that you get. So in a directional brightness instrument like this, you've got a light source which sits right here kind of against this back wall, if you will. Okay, that light illuminates on the sample plate here. Okay, so you can see here there's a little bit of light coming out of that. Okay, so that's the light. So you have a light source and it's directionally illuminating the sample at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so with that being the case, what we want to make sure is that our machine direction or the fiber direction is in parallel with the sample. Okay, so when you load that sample, you want to make sure that the orientation, the machine direction is just like this as well. Okay, so machine direction runs front to back of the instrument. Now, when we developed the Test Plus directional TAPPI brightness instrument, we talked to a lot of our different customers, and they said we would like to be able to configure this in different ways depending upon the application and depending upon our testers. So in our design of that, we put external to the instrument, the display, so that your interface, if you will, can be oriented depending upon how you have this instrument set up. So a number of customers already have the Test Plus instrument and they have it setting in this orientation. There are others, though, that prefer to set it up more like this. And the reason they choose this way is because that was consistent with how the S4M, or one of the older S4 instruments, was set up. Here now, the orientation of the instrument has stayed the same, so the lamp still sits here and it's still illuminating this sample port here. But you have to keep in mind that the orientation now is in this way, not this way as far as the operators and testing go. So just like the previous method, I would continue to load my samples in this way because the orientation, the machine direction, is still going on this axis. Okay, so whether you have it set up this way or rotate it 90 degrees, you always have to be mindful of what is the orientation of that so I measure my sample correctly. Now we're back and now we're ready to begin the calibration sequence on the instrument. Before we get started with that, let's just talk through the things that you will need to make sure you can get a good calibration with the instrument. One, you always need to make sure you have the 1 kilogram weight. Okay, so always when you're measuring on a directional instrument like this, the TAPPI method calls for a 1 kilogram weight to be the backing for that, so you have a consistent backing with that. You will need the opal tile that came with the instrument. So this is your working standard. You're probably using this already on a daily basis, maybe a shift-wise basis to keep the instrument in calibration. So we'll go through that step as well. And then you'll need a fresh set of paper calibration standards. Now, these standards have all been evaluated back in our master's lab. Okay, so with these, we load them onto the master instrument, get the values for those, we record those values on a tape, on a printout that we send along with the standards, so that once you get the instrument in calibration, you can then go through and measure this range from 50 to 90 to check the linearity of the instrument to make sure everything is good across a broad spectrum on that. So you get a large 5 different standards with that. Now on the standard, that's changed a little bit as you know over the years. So now instead of that little small pack of 1.5 by 2 inch paper tiles, basically everything now is all in one. So you've got a cover sheet here, so you pull the cover sheet back and these are the areas here that have been evaluated. Now on the back side you'll see numbers and locations. Okay, so that will tell you that this is position 1 and that associates with the first set of data on on the printout for the 70 tab. So I would load that on there, and I would know that the master instrument read that 73.97 on the master instrument. How does this instrument read it? Okay, so that's how that would work. So to begin the calibration sequence, up on the home screen, you'll see an icon up on the top menu bar that kind of looks like a crosshair. Okay, so you'll select that. Once you select that, then you have a choice of doing a primary calibration or a quick calibration. We're going to initially do the primary calibration because that's the first thing you have to do with the instrument. So I'll choose primary calibration, and the instrument will truly step us through what we need to do next in the calibration sequence. Okay, so there is a value in here, and that value I actually had already put in because I had previously done the calibration. All right, so that value is associated with the third position value on my paper tape. So I will take this machine direction like this. I will load the sample into position 3, load it with the load it with the 1 kilogram weight, and hit the calibrate button. Then the instrument's going to go through the calibration sequence of all the different functions, and then it's going to tie this instrument back to the master instrument back in our master's lab. All right, so it's stepping through that sequence, and as it does that, it will complete that process. Once that's completed, it will tell me to load the Opal standard that came with the set of calibration standards. All right, so I will take that off now. I will load the Opal. The value for this is 84.4. I will put that on the instrument. And now that reads 84.5, so I'm within a tenth, and that's what it states in the instructions there. So if you're within a tenth, you're ready to move to the next step. Let me stop for a second. If for some reason that is not within a tenth, you have to make a photocell adjustment, all right? And to do that, you pop this little cap off right here, and that'll give you access to the photocell adjustment. With the instrument, you received a photocell adjustment tool. We're not going to go through that process today because that takes a little bit longer than the basic calibration of the instrument, but we'll have a supplemental video which will show you how to step through that process, or you can contact our service department or your local area representative and they can talk you through that step. All right, so once we're good with that, we hit calibrate, and it tells us to load the working standard. So I now load the working standard and hit next, and now it's going to assess the working standard value. Okay, and so once I have that 85.8, what I would next do is write the date on the back of the tile, and I would write 85.8, and that would then be stored in the memory of the instrument so that when I want to do a quick cal, I can. Once the calibration is complete, I hit the home icon, and I'm back to the home screen, and I'm ready to do testing. All right, so that's the primary calibration. If I want to do a quick cal, I go back to the calibration page. I choose the quick calibration. It tells me to insert the working standard because it has the value stored for that. I do that, click OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to force the instrument back into agreement with the value that was assigned to that when we did this primary calibration just a minute ago. Okay, so once it completes that step, the calibration sequence will be completed for the quick calibration, and we'll be ready to test again. So the calibration sequence for this instrument is really quite simple. The important thing is that you make sure you have your fiber orientation correct when you load it onto the instrument, and when you're using these calibration standards, it's always in this direction. Okay? All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we'll be glad to do our best to answer those questions. Thanks.